My name is Daniel Hart, and I'm 63 now. What I'm about to tell you happened 5 years ago, back when my life, at least on paper, looked like the kind people point to and call made it. I was the CEO of Hartbridge Capital, a firm I'd built from nothing over 3 decades. I had the skyline outside my windows, a penthouse that stayed perfectly quiet no matter how loud the city became. I had tailored suits, glossy cars, first-class tickets with my name printed on thick, elegant paper. I had meetings where people leaned forward when I spoke, and dinners where everyone waited to see what I'd order. And yet, when the elevator doors closed behind me at the end of the day, the silence hit like cold air. My wife Elaine had died 4 years earlier, ovarian cancer. The kind of illness that doesn't just take someone away, it rearranges the furniture of your whole life, leaves empty spaces you can't ignore no matter how you try. We never had children. We'd chosen that together back when our calendars were packed and our dreams felt urgent and shiny. After she was gone, I worked as if I could outpace grief. 14-hour days, weekends that blurred into Mondays. I learned to measure my worth in numbers that rose and fell on screens. I had colleagues, sure, people who shook my hand, laughed at my jokes, addressed me with respect that felt rehearsed. But I didn't have anyone I could call when the apartment felt too large and my thoughts felt too loud. That evening, late November, the first real snow of the season had settled over the streets. From my office window, the city looked softened, almost kind. Around 8, my assistant reminded me there was nothing else on the schedule. "You should go home," she said gently, as if she already knew home wasn't a comfort. Home meant an empty kitchen, an untouched second pillow, and a bottle of wine I didn't even taste anymore. So I put on my coat and walked out into the snow instead. I ended up at a small Italian place called Bellini's. Not fancy, not loud, warm light, steamed up windows, the smell of garlic and baked bread that made you feel, for a moment, like you belonged somewhere. The hostess recognized me and led me to my usual corner table, back to the wall, a quiet view of the room. I just opened the menu when I noticed a ripple of tension near the entrance. A woman stood there with 2 children tucked close, a toddler balanced on her hip, his cheeks pink with cold. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, held something delicate in her hands, an origami crane folded from paper that looked like it had already lived a life. The hostess's voice was low, urgent, full of apology. "I'm sorry, without money I can't seat you." The woman's shoulders sank, not dramatically, just the way a person moves when they have learned disappointment is normal. "I understand," she said. "I thought, with the snow, could we sit for a few minutes? Just to warm up." The hostess shook her head, regret written across her face. They turned to go. Cold air rushed in as the door opened. The little girl looked back into the restaurant, her breath fogging the glass, her eyes lingering on the tables where people sat laughing, eating, being ordinary. Something in me cracked, quietly but completely. I stood up before I had time to talk myself out of it. "Excuse me," I called, and my voice surprised even me. The woman turned, guarded instantly, her body angling protectively in front of her children. "I have a table," I said, walking closer, "and I hate eating alone." The truth of that sat heavy on my tongue. Would you and your kids join me for dinner? My treat." Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly chased by suspicion, like she'd learned that kindness often comes with hooks. "I don't want charity," she said, quiet but firm. "It's not charity," I answered, and I meant it more than I expected. "It's company, just dinner, on a cold night." She studied my face for a long moment, looking for something wrong behind the offer. Then finally she nodded once. "Just dinner," she repeated, "and then we go." "Just dinner," I promised. And the hostess, suddenly relieved, guided us back toward my corner table as the snow kept falling outside, thicker now, like the world was trying to hush itself, the way a night should. Up close, the woman looked younger than I'd first thought. Early 30s maybe, but exhaustion had a way of adding years in the corners of a person's eyes. Her coat was thin, the kind meant for autumn, not a snow-heavy night. Still, she held herself with a dignity that didn't ask permission. Once we were seated, she adjusted the toddler on the chair beside her and smoothed the little girl's hair as if the small act could make everything feel more normal. I offered my hand across the table. "I'm Daniel." She hesitated, then shook it. Her fingers were cold. "I'm Mia," she said. "This is Lucy." She nodded toward the girl with the crane. "And this is Ben." Ben stared at me with huge, curious eyes, as if he was trying to decide whether I was real. Order whatever you like, I told Mia, keeping my voice gentle. Really? She opened the menu and froze. Not because she couldn't read it, because she was doing math no one else at the table could see. Calculating the cheapest item, the safest choice. Trying not to take up too much space in a world that already told her she took up too much. The chicken parm is good, I offered, and they do a simple pasta for kids. Ben, do you like spaghetti? Ben nodded hard immediately, like the word itself tasted good. Mia's mouth softened into the smallest smile, the kind that appears before a person remembers they're not supposed to relax. When the waiter came, I ordered for all of us, appetizers, warm bread, soup, a proper meal. Mia started to protest, but I lifted a hand. Please, I said, it's just food and it's cold out there. While we waited, Lucy watched me in a steady, quiet way. She still held the origami crane carefully, as if it might bruise. Her hands were red from the cold, but they were slowly warming in the restaurant's soft air. That's beautiful, I said to her. Did you make it? She nodded, shy at first. Then, as if deciding to be brave, she spoke. It's a crane. Origami. Lucy loves folding, Mia explained. Her voice faltered halfway through the sentence, as though it hurt to talk about something her daughter loved when everything else was so uncertain. Lucy leaned forward slightly. The crane is special, she said, very serious. If you fold 1,000, you get a wish. 1,000? I repeated, almost smiling. That's a lot of cranes. I have 743, she said instantly, with the precision of a child who counts hope because it's something she can control. I keep them in Mama's bag. When I get to 1,000, I'm going to wish for a home. The words landed in my chest like a weight and a light at the same time. Here I was, surrounded by comfort, with more money than I could reasonably spend, and I had been going home every night to loneliness so thick it felt like dust in the air. And across from me sat a child who had so little, but still believed that folding paper could create a doorway into a better life. When the food arrived, Mia fed Ben first, twirling spaghetti carefully, wiping his chin, her own plate cooling while she made sure her children were full. Lucy ate slowly, carefully, like wasting anything would be a kind of sin. Between bites, she began folding another crane from a napkin, her small fingers making crisp, practiced creases. I asked Mia softly, "How long have you been out there?" And immediately I wished I could pull the question back. "You don't have to answer." Mia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 3 months. Her eyes didn't lift from her plate. My husband died a 1.5 years ago. Work accident. No benefits. No safety net. She swallowed. I tried to keep the apartment. Then I got sick, missed shifts, and lost my job. Shelters when there's space. The car when there isn't. Her voice tightened. The car broke down 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, I said, and the words felt too small. She looked up then, and there was something fierce in her gaze. We'll be okay, I just need one chance. Outside the window, snow drifted in slow spirals. Inside, for the first time in years, I felt something I'd forgotten how to name. Connection. Not because they needed me, but because in their presence, I couldn't pretend I was fine. And somehow that scared me and steadied me all at once. After Mia told me about the 3 months on the streets, the table went quiet in that particular way it does when a truth has been placed down between strangers. Too heavy to ignore, too human to step around. I watched her as she ate. She tried to be discreet about her hunger, cutting small bites, pausing often to tend to Ben. Not because he demanded it, but because motherhood had trained her to put herself last without thinking. Every time he dropped a noodle, she picked it up gently, wiping the table as if she owed the world neatness in exchange for mercy. Lucy, meanwhile, folded. The napkin became a neat little square, then a sharp triangle, then something that started to resemble a bird. Her face was serious with concentration, lips pressed tight, eyebrows slightly knit. There was something almost sacred in the way she treated that napkin, like it wasn't just paper, but possibility. How did you learn? I asked her, partly to lighten the air, partly because I wanted to hear her voice again. She glanced up, then back down at her hands. Library, she said, they had a program Miss Nora taught us. Mia's gaze softened for a fraction of a second at the mention of the library, and then her expression tightened again, like she'd remembered something painful. A former life? An ordinary routine, a home address. I realized then how easily I'd been living inside abstractions. Homelessness, poverty, hard times, words that slid past my mind like headlines. But here they were, two children with clean but worn clothes, a mother whose hands shook faintly when she lifted her glass of water, as if her body couldn't fully relax even in warmth. "You're very kind," Mia said after a while, voice low. "Most people don't see us." I didn't know what to say that wouldn't feel like a polished statement, so I chose honesty. "I'm ashamed to admit it," I said, keeping my eyes on the table for a moment. "I've probably been one of those people, walking past, telling myself I donate, so I've done enough." Mia looked at me, and the judgment I expected didn't come. Instead, she gave a small nod, almost like relief. "At least you're honest," she said. Dessert arrived, ice cream for the kids, coffee for Mia and me. Ben's face lit up in a way that was almost startling, like joy had been hiding behind his ribs and suddenly found a crack to slip through. Lucy took small, careful bites, saving some, as if part of her couldn't believe there would be enough. I tried to keep the conversation gentle. I learned Mia had worked as a dental hygienist. She wasn't uneducated or careless. She was normal, skilled, responsible. The kind of person my company would have hired without a second thought if her life had stayed steady. But steady lives aren't guaranteed. All it takes is one accident, one illness, one landlord raising rent, one job cutting shifts. I'd spent years believing I was in control of everything because I'd worked hard. Sitting across from Mia, I felt a new, uncomfortable awareness. Hard work mattered, yes, but luck and timing mattered too. When it was time to leave, I paid the bill and tipped more than I normally would, partly because the staff had been kind, and partly because my chest felt too full, and I didn't know how else to express it. Mia gathered their few belongings quickly, as if staying too long might invite trouble. Lucy stood from her chair and walked around the table toward me. For a moment, I thought she might say goodbye and run back to her mother. Instead, she held out the napkin crane she'd been folding. "This is for you," she said solemnly. I took it carefully. It was delicate and surprisingly perfect. Perfect. Each crease crisp despite being made from a restaurant napkin. It was still warm from her hands. "Thank you, Lucy," I said, and my voice caught in my throat in a way that embarrassed me. "It's for good luck," she explained. Then she added softer, like it was a secret she'd decided to share with only me. "And to help you not be lonely anymore." The words froze me. Not because a child had said something sweet. Children say sweet things all the time. It froze me because she'd seen it. The loneliness I dressed in expensive fabric. The emptiness I disguised with achievement. Mia's cheeks flushed with the apology. "I told her you eat alone a lot," she murmured, like she'd revealed something private. "It's all right," I managed. She's right." Lucy nodded once, satisfied, as if she'd done an important job. Then she returned to her mother's side. They left in a gust of cold air as the door opened, stepping back into the snow. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the small crane in my palm. It was ridiculous in a way, me, a man who signed million-dollar deals, sitting stunned by a napkin folded into a bird. But the truth is, the smallest things can reach places that money can't. That night, I went home and placed the crane on my nightstand. The penthouse looked the same, sleek, spotless, silent, but something in me had shifted, like a locked door had cracked open, and I couldn't stop thinking about them. I woke the next morning with the strange sensation that I'd been dreaming, except the crane was still there, perched beside my bedside lamp, like proof that the night had happened. For years, my mornings had been predictable. Shower, suit, coffee, car, office, every movement efficient, every minute accounted for. But that day, I stood in my kitchen, holding my mug, and looking out at the snow-covered streets. And I felt restless. I didn't go straight to work. Instead, I sat at the counter, picked up my phone, and did something I hadn't done in a long time, asked for help without knowing exactly how it would go. I called a social services agency. My voice, usually so firm in boardrooms, sounded oddly cautious. "I met a family last night," I told the woman on the line. "A mother and 2 children. They're struggling. I don't know their last name, but I know where I met them, and I know their first names. Is there a way to reach them?" There was silence, then a careful explanation about privacy, policies, what they could and couldn't do. I expected it. Still, I didn't hang up. I'm not trying to force anything, I said. Please, if you have contact with her, tell her someone wants to help. Tell her there's an offer if she wants it. The woman's tone softened slightly. We can pass along a message, she said. That's all I can promise. That's enough, I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. Then I made another call, this time to my HR director. I want to know our current hiring needs, I said, pacing my living room, the crane now tucked carefully into my coat pocket like a talisman. And I want to know what support services we offer employees who are dealing with housing insecurity or difficult transitions. There was a pause. Sir, my HR director said carefully, we don't really. Then we should, I cut in, not harshly, but with a clarity that startled even me. Find out what exists. Find out what we can build. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. The man near the subway grate warming his hands. The woman outside the pharmacy holding a sign with trembling fingers. The cluster of people huddled near a shelter entrance, shoulders rounded against the wind. Before I would have looked through them. Now my gaze kept catching, as if my eyes had finally adjusted to a truth that had always been there. On Wednesday evening, I went to a shelter. Not with cameras, not with a publicist. Just me, in a simple coat, signing my name on a volunteer sheet. The director looked skeptical until I rolled up my sleeves and asked where I was needed. Kitchen, she said. So I served soup, I wiped tables. I listened, really listened, to stories that didn't fit neatly into the moral boxes people like to use. Lazy, irresponsible, addict, dangerous. Most of the people I met were simply exhausted. Many had worked their whole lives until one crack turned into a collapse. That week, I also did something else. I called my younger brother Nathan. We hadn't spoken in years. Our fallout had started as a business disagreement. Money, pride, old resentments, and hardened into silence. I used to tell myself I was too busy, that he was stubborn, that time would fix it. Time doesn't fix what pride refuses to touch. When Nathan answered, there was a long pause, like he didn't recognize the number, or didn't believe it was me. Daniel, he said finally. It's me, I replied, my throat tightened. I've been thinking, and I don't want to keep doing this, not talking. Another pause, then quietly, neither do I. We didn't solve everything in that call, but we opened the door. I called my mother too, more than just the quick holiday check-in. I asked how her days were. I listened to the small details, the neighbor's new dog, the book she was reading, the way her knees ached when it rained. Ordinary life, the kind I'd been skipping over while chasing achievements that never hugged me back. 2 weeks after the dinner at Bellini's, the social services agency called. She reached out, the woman said. Mia, she said, she remembers you. She wants to talk. My chest tightened with something like relief and fear all mixed together. We met for coffee in the middle of the day at a small cafe near the agency. Mia arrived early, children in tow, her posture guarded, but her eyes steady. Lucy carried a small stack of folded cranes in her backpack like precious cargo. Mia sat across from me, hands wrapped around a paper cup, and said, I'm here to understand what you want. And I realized in that moment how important it was to get this right. Not to play savior, not to buy gratitude, not to treat them like a story that made me feel good. So I took a breath and spoke carefully. I want to offer you a job, I said. Not because I feel sorry for you, because you're qualified. And because everyone deserves one real chance. Mia's eyes narrowed. I can't accept charity, she said, voice firm, echoing the night at the restaurant. It's not charity, I replied, echoing myself just as firmly. It's a job offer. Lucy, quiet beside her mother, reached into her bag and placed another small crane on the table, like she was reminding the world to stay gentle. And Mia looked at it, then back at me, as if weighing whether hope was safe. Mia didn't reach for the crane Lucy had placed on the cafe table. She didn't smile, didn't soften the way people do in movies when help arrives. Instead, she studied me the way someone studies ice before stepping onto it, looking for the cracks that could swallow her. Why, she asked. One word, sharp and honest. Not accusatory, just careful. She had every reason to be. The cafe around us hummed with lunchtime noise. Steam rose from cups. People typed on laptops, laughed, complained about traffic. Ordinary life moved like a river beside us. And for Mia, I realized that ordinariness must have felt like standing outside a house you used to live in. I didn't answer quickly. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to tell the truth without making it about my own guilt. Because you're qualified, I said first. You worked as a dental hygienist. You have training, discipline, experience with people. I paused. And because your daughter gave me something I didn't know I needed. Mia's expression tightened, like she expected a sentimental speech. I held her gaze anyway. She told me she hoped I wouldn't be lonely anymore. And my voice faltered slightly, which annoyed me, but I let it happen. It hit me, not as pity, as a wake-up call. I've been living a life that looks full but feels empty. Lucy watched me with a seriousness that didn't belong to a child her age. Ben was busy stirring sugar into hot chocolate Mia had insisted he share with her, his small hands sticky, his attention blissfully simple. Mia looked down at her cup. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. You don't know me. You're right, I said. I don't, and I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I leaned back slightly, giving her space. If you take the job, you'll be treated like any other employee. You'll have to show up, learn, perform. The only difference is I'm willing to work with you on a start date and flexibility until you're stable. Her jaw tightened, like she was holding something back. Pride, maybe, or fear of being humiliated. And housing, she asked? I can connect you with programs, I said. Through the agency and through benefits we apparently have access to that I didn't even know existed until I started asking questions. That admission felt important. I'm learning. I should have been paying attention a long time ago. Mia let out a breath that looked like it had been trapped in her chest for months. I'm not looking for special treatment, she said. I'm not offering a shortcut, I replied. I'm offering an open door. Lucy slid the crane a little closer to me, then to her mother like she wanted both of us to touch something gentle at the same time. Mia's fingers hovered near it, then finally settled on the table beside it, not quite ready to hold it, but no longer pushing it away. What kind of job? She asked. At first, administrative support, I said. We have an internal dental plan provider liaison role that's been understaffed. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Full benefits. And if you do well, it can lead to more. Mia's eyes flickered, calculating, again, that silent math. But this time it wasn't just about prices on a menu. It was about possibility. How soon, she asked. Whenever you can, I said. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now. Less heavy, more like a bridge being measured before someone dared to cross. At last, Mia nodded once. 3 weeks, she said. I need time to figure out childcare and everything. 3 weeks, I agreed. Lucy's face brightened as if she'd just watched a wish take shape in real time. Ben, sensing the shift without understanding it, grinned with chocolate on his lip. When we stood to leave, Mia hesitated. I'm still cautious, she admitted. I'd be worried if you weren't, I told her. Outside, the snow had melted into slush, the city returning to its hurried gray. But as Mia gathered the kids, Lucy slipped another crane into my hand, smaller than the first, folded from a scrap of paper that looked like it came from a receipt. For your desk, she said softly. I curled my fingers around it like it was fragile glass. Thank you, I managed. And as they walked away, I realized something unsettling and hopeful at once. I wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings. I was thinking about childcare schedules, transportation, shelter rules, resumes, real life. The kind of life that includes people. That afternoon, I returned to my office and stared at the glass walls, the polished surfaces, the silent luxury. For the first time, it looked less like success and more like distance. So I started changing things. Not all at once, not with grand announcements, in small, stubborn steps. I asked HR to map local support resources and partnerships. I asked our legal team about employee hardship funds. I asked our managers to attend training about trauma-informed supervision, words I'd never used in this building before. And every time someone looked at me like I'd lost my mind, I touched the little crane in my pocket and kept going. Mia started 3 weeks later, exactly as she'd said. The first day, she arrived early, hair pulled back neatly, coat still too thin for the season but clean. Lucy held Ben's hand at the lobby entrance while the agency caseworker waited with them, ready to escort the kids back to the shelter daycare program. Mia's eyes darted around the lobby, marble floors, framed awards, the kind of space designed to intimidate with quiet perfection. I remembered walking through these doors the first time decades ago, young and hungry, believing this world was the only one that mattered. Now I watched Mia stand there and I understood a different hunger, safety. I met her near the elevators, not as the CEO, but as Daniel, the man who had shared pasta with her kids on a snow night. "You're on time," I said. "I'm always on time," she replied, and there was something almost defensive in it, like punctuality was her armor. "That's a good habit," I said gently. Her training was straightforward. The work was steady. She learned quickly, not just because she was smart, but because she had no room for error. When life has punished you for small mistakes, you become meticulous. Within days, people noticed her competence, not her circumstances, her skill. A week in, my HR director called me. "She's impressive," she admitted, sounding slightly surprised. "I know," I said simply. We helped Mia access temporary housing through a program our company had partnered with years ago and forgotten to use. An apartment in a modest building, nothing fancy but warm, a door that locked, a bathroom that belonged to them, a kitchen where Lucy could stand on a chair and stir noodles without worrying someone would tell them to leave. The day Mia got the keys, she didn't cry. She just stood in the empty living room with her hand on the doorknob, eyes fixed on the walls like she couldn't believe they would stay. Lucy ran from room to room, her laughter echoing. Ben toddled after her, shouting nonsense words that sounded like freedom. Mia finally turned to me, and her voice broke, not into bombs, just into a tiny crack. "Thank you," she said. I shook my head, careful. "You did this," I told her. "You showed up." But later that night, alone in my penthouse, I caught myself looking at the crane on my nightstand and feeling an ache that wasn't sadness exactly. It was recognition. They were building a home, and I still had a house. So I kept volunteering. One evening a week at the shelter kitchen, quietly serving meals without anyone making a fuss. I learned names. I learned stories. I learned that people are rarely a single bad choice. They're usually a chain of events, one after another, until the ground gives way. And I kept reaching back toward my own life too. Nathan and I started meeting for coffee every other Sunday. At first we talked around the big pain, focusing on safe topics, sports scores, our mother's health, the city's weather. But slowly the old anger loosened. We apologized in clumsy, imperfect ways. We laughed once, real laughter, over a childhood memory, and it felt like thawing. Mia, meanwhile, kept her head down and worked. Every paycheck went toward stability. She saved carefully, like someone building a wall brick by brick. 6 months later, she had enough for a deposit on a small apartment of her own. I didn't pay it. She did. And when she told me, there was pride in her eyes so fierce it made my throat tighten. Lucy started school and joined an origami club. Ben entered preschool. Their lives began to fill with normal things: lunchboxes, homework folders, scraped knees, storybooks. And I, without planning it, started having dinner with them once in a while. Not as a benefactor, not as a savior, just a man at a table with people who talked about spelling tests and silly jokes and how Ben insisted dinosaurs could be pets. The first time I sat in their modest apartment and heard Lucy say, "Daniel, look, I folded a dragon," something loosened in my chest so suddenly I had to look away. Because it wasn't just that I'd helped them. It was that they had unknowingly helped me return to something I'd misplaced: my ability to belong. And every day when the work threatened to pull me back into old patterns, I looked at the crane now sitting in a small display case on my desk. It was faded, a little worn at the edges, but it was real. And it reminded me, the best investments aren't always financial. Sometimes they're a warm meal, a second chance, and a paper bird folded by small hands, given not out of abundance, but out of kindness. Time has a quiet way of proving what's real. A year after that snowy dinner, Mia wasn't the woman I helped. In the office, she was simply Mia, reliable, sharp, and calm under pressure. People stopped whispering about how she'd gotten the pin and started asking her for advice because she was the one who knew how to solve problems without making noise about it. I noticed how she carried herself differently too. Not dramatically at the mayam. No movie montage transformation, just small changes that meant everything. Her shoulders weren't as tense. Her eyes didn't scan every room like danger might be hiding behind a coffee machine. She laughed sometimes, quick and surprised, as if the sound still startled her. Lucy grew into her school routine with a seriousness that reminded me of how she folded her cranes: patient, deliberate, careful not to waste anything. She joined the origami club and came home with new folds, frogs that hopped, boats that floated in the sink, a tiny paper heart she taped to the fridge. Ben, on the other hand, exploded into childhood like a firework. He learned to run without constantly looking back. He made friends. He asked for seconds at dinner without the fear that asking was a sin. He told everyone he wanted to be a firefighter, and he said it with the full confidence of a child who believes the world might actually let him grow up. As for me, I kept the old habits at bay the way you keep weeds from returning, by noticing them early. I still worked hard. I still sat in meetings. I still made decisions that affected hundreds of employees, but I was learning not to let work be the only place I existed. Some evenings, instead of going to my penthouse and pouring a drink into silence, I went to the shelter and served meals. Other evenings, I met Nathan for coffee. My mother and I talked every Sunday, and sometimes she would laugh and say, "Who are you and what have you done with my son?" as if kindness had turned me into a stranger. And then there were the dinners with Mia and the kids. They weren't fancy. Pasta in a small kitchen, takeout eaten on the couch while Lucy explained a new fold and Ben interrupted with jokes that barely made sense. It was ordinary life, messy, loud, imperfect. It was everything I hadn't known I was starving for. One evening, about 18 months after the restaurant night, Lucy climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table and opened a shoebox. Inside were cranes, dozens, maybe hundreds, some made of colored paper, some from notebook sheets, some from old flyers. She sorted them carefully like treasures. "I have 912, she announced. Mia froze slightly, and I saw something pass across her face. An old fear, maybe. The reminder of when 1,000 cranes had been the only hope Lucy could hold. "You're still counting," I said softly to Lucy. She nodded, "But it's different now." "How?" Lucy looked at me with that same calm seriousness she'd had at 5. "Because I already got my wish," she said. "We have a home." Mia turned away quickly, pretending to busy herself with dishes. But I saw her wipe her cheek with the back of her hand. Lucy continued, as if explaining something obvious. "So now I fold them for other people." She picked up a crane and held it toward me. "This one is for someone at the shelter, the one who always sits in the corner. He doesn't talk." I swallowed. "That's kind of you." She shrugged with the plain honesty of children. "He looks lonely." The word hit me again. Lonely. Not like an accusation, like a simple observation of the human condition. And I realized Lucy hadn't stopped making cranes because she'd reached 1,000. She had stopped because she didn't need to bargain with the universe anymore. She had learned something most adults struggle to learn. Wishes don't always arrive in fireworks. Sometimes they arrive as a door that locks, a job that holds steady, and a table where someone remembers your name. That night, when I left their apartment, Mia walked me to the hallway. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice quiet. I waited. "At first," she admitted, "I thought you were doing this because you felt sorry for us. And I hated that feeling. I hated needing anything." "I understand," I said. She looked down, then back up. "But you never tried to own it. You never made it about you. You let me work. You let me earn. You let me keep my dignity." I felt a pressure behind my eyes and forced myself to blink it away. "You've done all the hard parts," I told her. Mia shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "you did something hard too. You saw us." And then she added, so softly I almost missed it, "Most people don't." I rode the elevator down and walked out into the night, and the city didn't feel like a glittering machine anymore. It felt like a place full of hidden stories, some broken, some healing, some still waiting for a hand to reach out. The changes at my company started quietly, the way real change often does, without speeches. First, we expanded our employee assistance program. Then we created an emergency fund for staff facing sudden crises, medical bills, temporary housing, childcare gaps. We partnered with a local nonprofit that helped people navigate benefits and job training. We brought in counselors who could teach managers what it meant to supervise someone who'd lived through trauma. At first, some board members resisted. "This isn't our business," one of them told me during a tense meeting. "We're a financial firm, Daniel, not a charity." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "It is our business," I replied, "because our people are our business. And because stability isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's whether someone can come to work without wondering where their kids will sleep." The room went quiet. A few people looked uncomfortable. A few looked thoughtful. And a few, to my surprise, nodded. That was another lesson I learned. Most people aren't heartless. They're just busy, distracted, trained to look away. I used to be one of them. The paper crane on my desk became more than a reminder. It became a kind of compass. When I felt myself slipping back into old patterns, late nights that were really avoidance, work that was really numbing, I looked at that fragile bird and remembered Lucy's voice, to help you not be lonely anymore. Loneliness doesn't always mean you're alone. Sometimes it means you're untouched. Around the second anniversary of that dinner, my brother Nathan came to my office for the first time. He stood in front of my desk, looked at the display case, and lifted an eyebrow. "What's that?" he asked. "A crane," I said. Nathan smirked. "You with a paper bird. Who are you?" I laughed. An actual laugh, the kind that shakes loose tension you didn't realize you were carrying. "A man who's learning," I said. Nathan's expression softened, and he nodded like he understood more than he was saying. After he left, I sat alone for a moment and realized something else. I didn't dread being alone anymore. The difference mattered. Before, solitude had been a punishment, a proof that my life was empty. Now it was simply a pause between moments of connection. A quiet room that wasn't haunted. One snowy evening, almost exactly 5 years after the night at Bellini's, Mia called me. "Lucy wants to see you," she said, amusement in her voice. "She says it's important." I arrived at their apartment with a bag of groceries and a cautious curiosity. Ben, now bigger, louder, full of opinions, opened the door and immediately launched into a story about a fire truck he'd seen on the way home. Lucy waited at the table, a stack of paper in front of her. "I made something," she said. "A crane?" I guessed. She rolled her eyes, the first sign of preteen impatience. "Not just a crane." She lifted a small string. On it were dozens of tiny cranes connected like a garland. Some were bright, some patterned, some plain. Each one was folded with care. "What is it?" I asked, genuinely moved. Lucy held it up carefully. "It's for the shelter," she said, "for the kids' room, so it looks happier." Mia watched her daughter with a look I couldn't quite name. Pride threaded with disbelief, like she still couldn't fully accept that this was their life now. Lucy continued, "And I made one more thing." She slid a single crane across the table toward me. It was made from thick paper, sturdier than a napkin, and on one wing she had drawn a tiny symbol, a house with a heart inside it. "You can keep that one," she said, trying to sound casual and failing. I picked it up carefully. "Thank you," I said. Lucy shrugged. "You helped us," she said simply. Then she hesitated, her voice lowering. "But you know you helped you too, right?" My throat tightened. Mia looked away, suddenly busy with stirring a pot. Ben stopped talking for a rare moment, sensing the seriousness. Lucy's eyes stayed on mine. "You used to look like you were made of glass," she said, choosing words the way only kids do, strangely perfect. "Like if someone touched you, you'd crack." I didn't know how to respond. "And now," she added, "you look warmer." I swallowed hard. "That's because of you," I said quietly. Lucy made a face. "It's because you stopped being stubborn," she corrected, and Ben burst out laughing. And just like that, the heaviness lifted, replaced by something light and real. Family-style teasing, shared warmth, the ordinary miracle of a table where people feel safe enough to be themselves. Later, walking back to my car, snow beginning to fall again, I realized I could finally tell the truth without flinching. That dinner hadn't been my good deed. It had been my turning point. I thought I was buying a meal for strangers. But what I'd really received was a return to humanity, a reminder that success without connection is just a polished kind of poverty, and that sometimes the most valuable thing you can be given is a small paper bird folded by cold hands, offered with nothing but a pure hope that you won't be lonely anymore. People started asking questions once the changes at Heartbridge became visible. Not the public, this wasn't headline material, but inside the quiet corridors of wealth and strategy, people noticed when a CEO stopped talking only about profit margins and began asking about rent burdens, childcare gaps, emergency funds. They noticed when employee stability became more than a buzzword in a slide deck. One afternoon, after a quarterly review, a senior executive stayed behind while everyone else filed out. He shut the conference room door gently and said, "Daniel, can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why are you doing all this?" He gestured vaguely toward the folder of program proposals. The shelter partnerships, the hardship fund, The volunteer days, it's not exactly traditional. I could have given him the polished answer. Corporate responsibility, retention, public goodwill. All of those things were true in a practical sense, but they weren't the reason my chest felt steady now when I walked through my days. So I told him the truth. 5 years ago, I said, I bought dinner for a mother and her 2 kids on a snowy night. He waited, unsure where the story was going. They were homeless, I continued, turned away at the door. I invited them to my table because I hesitated, because I was tired of eating alone. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until that moment. The executive's expression softened, a crack in his professional mask. And after dinner, I said, the little girl left me a paper crane. A paper crane, he repeated. I nodded. She told me it was for good luck and to help me not be lonely anymore. The room was quiet. The city beyond the glass windows glittered, indifferent. Inside, something human settled into place. That's why, I finished, because one child with nothing reminded me what matters. He didn't argue. He didn't scoff. He just sat there for a moment, looking down at his hands, as if he was remembering something in himself that had been ignored for a long time. After he left, I opened the small display case on my desk and looked at Lucy's first crane, the napkin one, now faded, edges slightly worn. It was fragile, but it had survived years, like the truth it carried. Sometimes in the evening, I still went to Bellini's. Not because I needed to hide in a corner anymore, but because it was where the shift had begun. The place where I stopped living like a man locked behind glass. On one of those evenings, the hostess, the same woman who had once apologized to Mia at the door, recognized me again. She smiled warmly and said, "You know, I still remember that night." "I do too," I replied. She lowered her voice. "I've seen a lot of people come in here," she said. "Rich, poor, happy, miserable. But I've never seen someone change that fast just from sharing a meal." I didn't correct her, because she was right and wrong at the same time. It hadn't been fast. It had been waiting under the surface for years, my loneliness, my grief, my numbness. The dinner hadn't created the change. It had simply exposed what was already unbearable. And it gave me a direction. Mia and the kids came to dinner with me sometimes now, especially when Lucy wanted to show the staff her latest origami. The first time they walked into Bellini's together, Mia paused at the entrance. I saw her eyes dart to the spot where she'd once been turned away, and I saw that old fear flicker like a shadow. I didn't rush her. Lucy slipped her hand into her mother's and squeezed. Then Mia lifted her chin and stepped inside like she belonged, because she did. We ate in warmth, watched snow fall beyond the windows, and it struck me how quietly the world could change, not through speeches or grand gestures, but through one door opening when it used to be closed. That night, after the kids had dessert, Lucy leaned across the table and asked me, very seriously, "Do you still feel lonely?" I considered the question carefully, because she deserved a real answer. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not the way I used to." Lucy nodded as if that made sense. "It's okay," she said. "Everyone gets lonely sometimes, but you don't have to stay there." Out of the mouths of children again. And I realized something. Loneliness isn't the enemy. Staying isolated is. Pretending you don't need anyone is. Grief had taught me how to close. Lucy had taught me how to open. Now, 5 years later, I'm still the CEO. I still live comfortably. I still wear suits that cost too much and sit in meetings where people talk about numbers like they're the only language worth speaking. But my life isn't built only out of work anymore. The shelter still has my name on the volunteer list once a week. Sometimes I serve meals. Sometimes I just sit and talk with someone who needs to be heard without being fixed. I've learned not to rush people towards solutions the way my old mind used to rush toward profit. I've also learned to repair what can be repaired. Nathan and I are brothers again, not perfectly, not magically, but genuinely. We show up for our mother together. We argue sometimes, sure, but it doesn't turn into silence. It turns into a conversation, and then into laughter, and then into another cup of coffee. Mia has been promoted twice, not because anyone took pity on her, but because she's good at what she does. She leads a small team now, and when new employees come in shaky and afraid, she has a way of looking at them that says, "I see you, you're safe here. Let's start." Lucy is 10 now, still folding origami, still giving cranes away to people she thinks might need good luck. She never reached 1,000 for her wish, not because she failed, but because the wish came true before the count did. And I think that's one of the quiet miracles of childhood. They don't cling to the ritual once the heart of it has been answered. Ben is in first grade and still insists he wants to be a firefighter. He runs through life with a confidence that makes my throat tighten sometimes, because I remember the boy with cold hands and wide eyes staring at spaghetti like it was treasure. They're not homeless anymore. They have a home, stability, and maybe the most important thing, hope. But the truth is they gave me something too. They reminded me that home isn't only a physical place, it's a feeling, a sense of belonging, the comfort of being known, the safety of a table where you don't have to perform. That night in the restaurant, I thought I was doing a good deed by buying dinner for strangers. What I didn't realize until later was that they were offering me a gift I couldn't have bought with all my wealth, a return to humanity. Because the best gifts don't always come in expensive packages. Sometimes they come folded out of a napkin. Sometimes they come from small hands that have every reason to be guarded, but choose kindness anyway. I keep Lucy's first crane in a display case on my desk. It's faded now. The paper has softened, corners worn, but that only makes it feel more real, like a reminder that tenderness can survive time if you protect it. When I'm tempted to disappear into work again, when I feel the old numbness trying to close around me, I look at that crane and remember the sound of Lucy's voice. "This is for you," she'd said, "to help you not be lonely anymore." And the strange thing is, her wish came true. Not because loneliness vanished forever. Life doesn't work that way. But because I stopped treating connection like an optional luxury. I stopped pretending I didn't need people. I stopped measuring success only in money and power and control and started measuring it in something quieter. How many times I showed up, how many times I chose to see, how many times I made space at the table. If someone asked me now why I spend time on these programs, why I volunteer, why I care, why I run, when I could just focus on profit, I'd tell them the same story. A snowy November night, a mother at a door, 2 children with cold hands, and a paper crane left on my table. Because the best investment I ever made wasn't financial. It was the cost of a dinner that reminded me we're all connected, that we all need each other. That kindness isn't just something we give. It's also something we receive, sometimes in the smallest form, until it changes the shape of our whole life.